So I want them to have a fresh perspective on who Jesus was. I think a lot of things get in the way sometimes of us seeing clearly who Jesus was and what Christianity stands for. And I want a fresh perspective, and I want women to know how much they're loved by Jesus.
We'll talk about this and much more today. Welcome to a Writer's Day podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back to a Writer's Day podcast. My name is Ruth Douthit, and I'm so glad you're here with me today. I created this podcast for you, folks who love to listen to published authors talk about their writing journeys and to learn more about their books. And my guest today is definitely one who's going to inspire you. So if you like what you hear, please consider subscribing over at YouTube, follow me on Spotify, and head over to artbyruth.com to learn more about me and my upcoming projects, like my fantasy dragon coloring book coming soon and my Christmas novella, Murder at Christmas Tree Village. That's right. And this novella releases December 2nd, and it's available for pre-order right now on Amazon. Okay, enough of that. Let's get started. Katie Sampias is here with me today. She is a woman who loves Jesus, and it took her 12 years to write her first book, which is out in the world today. And she's joining me from Brisbane, Australia. That's right, to talk about her writing journey, her spiritual pilgrimage, and her new book, Her Story of Jesus. So you know the drill. Grab your favorite beverage, a comfortable chair, kick back and relax as we listen to Katie Sampias talk about her new book. Hey everyone, welcome back to Writer's Day podcast. I'm so excited to have a friend to talk with, and she is in Australia right now, and probably the first author I've ever spoken to from Australia. So welcome to Katie Sampias to my podcast.
Hi, Ruth. It's so good to be here. Thanks for welcoming me on the podcast.
Of course. Now, both of us met through Podmatch, and so it's been so exciting to be a member of Podmatch. I've met some wonderful authors who I probably would never have met, so this is an honor. And so why don't you tell my listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name's Katie Sampias. I'm in my early 40s. I have 3 kids, 7, 5, and 3, and I'm married to a wonderful man called Matt, who's originally from Denver, Colorado. So I am familiar with America a little bit, and I lived there for a couple of years. I am at the moment in Brisbane, Australia, and I had my first book published through a Texan publisher called Color Press in July this year. It's called Her Story of Jesus, and it looks at the Gospels from women's perspectives. It's a series of imaginings of the Gospels from different points of view. For example, from the point of view of Pilate's wife viewing the sentencing of Jesus, the bride at the wedding of Cana experiencing what it's like to go through a discernment of marriage and how she came to be married at that wedding in Cana. And then I also, with all these stories, I think there's 11 stories, and I go into my own personal journey in reflecting on what I learnt by writing the book. It took me a really long time to write this book, and I don't know if this process happens for everyone. I think the writing journey is different for everybody. But for me, this book came to me over time. It was something I had to work at, but the idea for it came over time. And I got little glimpses of parts of the Gospels, and then I pieced them together in stories. The very first piece that I wrote was the piece about Pilate's wife, and I did that for an assessment piece for university when I went back in my late 20s, early 30s to study journalism in a historical fiction course. And then over time, it became apparent to me that I was to write this book, and it was going to be a series of stories that follows the chronology of Jesus's life. So the order in which the stories are written in the book is different to how I wrote them. And I learned a lot on this, what I call an imaginative pilgrimage. about my own faith and about Jesus. Um, and I talk about that in the book as well. So that's what my book's about. I'm excited to have it published. I'm excited to work with Calipress Publishing in Texas. And yeah, the journey has been a big one, a long one. And I learned a lot also through working with a publisher and the editing process. I hadn't done that before. And here I am, putting myself out there on Podmatch and doing podcasts to promote my book.
Wow, that's wonderful. So, did you always want to be a writer?
Yes, so definitely that was definitely buried deep, not really that deep within me. I always had that desire ever since I think I can identify it from about grade 2 or 3. I love writing, and that was my favorite thing at school was writing stories and the free time that we had to just free write. And then when I was 12, I won a competition with the paper, local paper, because journalism was a bit different back then, and there were more papers, I guess, more printed publications. And I won a trip to Vanuatu for submitting poetry and short stories and think pieces into the local paper. Um, and then I guess, I loved English at school and stuff, but didn't really, was talked into it not being my main career path, writing, just due to monetary considerations and how much you get paid for writing. So I studied something different at university. Um, and then I went back to it later because I still had that desire, and that's when this book kicked off.
Wonderful. And so, for your very first book project, that's quite a choice. That's quite an endeavor. And so is it fiction or is it's like you're imagining the true stories, but in a nonfiction book or?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because different Christians are comfortable with different levels of fictionalization of the Bible. This pretty much is like a classical interpretation. It follows the Bible, but it's from different perspectives and definitely considers sort of the deeper emotional state and mystical things that happen during the Bible from women's points of view. I've tried to write it so that it will be something that most people are comfortable with rather than it's not a controversial take. It's not there to shock you. I wrote it to deepen my own faith originally. That's what I was writing for myself to begin with, and then what I want it to be for is for everyone.
That's beautiful. What an inspiration. I love that. Yes, I've always been drawn to the women that Jesus encountered, especially the woman at the well.
Oh, that's interesting you say that too, because I've been thinking that I want to turn her story into a novel one day.
Oh, you should. It's such a powerful story that really resonates with me. It's very similar to my own journey, but I use that story a lot to help women who have been broken, women who are healing from a past that maybe they don't want to talk about. And I just love that here we are thousands of years later, still talking about this woman of ill repute, this woman who probably shouldn't have been mentioned, but yet was, and how Jesus changed her life and then used her in an amazing way. What were some of the reasons why you chose the women of the Bible and say not, just another story that we've heard about Jesus?
I think this has been an interest that's been always with me. When I was at high school, I studied ancient history, and I think I did at least 1 or 2 assignments on women in ancient Rome and Greece. And I've always been interested in women's perspectives. I mean, I am a woman, but I was always drawn to know what their lives were like. So I think that was an interest that was always in me. And being a woman, I wanted to see what it was like to actually meet Jesus in person from that perspective. So that's why I wrote it this way. And then it's interesting you ask like about the choices of the people I wrote from the perspectives I wrote from. I started off with Pilate's wife, and I realized when I wrote the book that that was probably because she was pretty far away from Jesus. And so it was an easy one to start with. There wasn't much known about her. I mean, she was Roman, married to Pilate. So I knew stuff about Roman women from my previous assignments. Um, and it was interesting to imagine her encountering Jesus. But then as I got further into writing this book, I started writing from closer perspectives. So people that actually were physically touched by Jesus, like I call her Anya in the book, the bleeding woman,
Mm-hmm.
or and then one of the last pieces I wrote was Mary's perspective of visiting Elizabeth and um, the overshadowing of the Holy Spirit when she conceived Jesus. That's the first story in the book. Um, but also, when you talk about the Samaritan woman, um, the perspective I chose for her is not actually her own perspective. It's actually from her daughter's perspective, and she's waiting upon a letter to find out whether or not her mother has passed away because there's a bit written about her. Her name was Fotini, the Samaritan woman, and she ended up dying in Rome, according to various Christian denominations, in the court of Nero. She was murdered by him. So it's sort of a reflection on the life of how her daughter was affected by her conversion. Um, so that's, I don't know, these stories just came to me over time. Interestingly, I didn't choose to write the resurrection from the point of view of Mary Magdalene. And I think that's because there's so much about her that I felt like I it would be controversial or I wouldn't be able to please everyone doing it from her perspective, because there's so much written about her. So I actually do it from the point of view of Joanna, who's a lesser known woman that is recorded as being there at Jesus' death. Um, so yeah, it was just choices I made over time. The other reason I chose Joanna is because when I was doing my research, I came across some theologians that were talking about the life of Joanna and where she would have lived and what her life would have been like. And that was inspirational for me for the piece. So the bits and pieces of it's bits and pieces that inspired me to write from those women's perspectives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. I had no idea about all that with the Samaritan woman. That's fascinating.
Mm.
Interesting too. I'd like to read about that. Well, so what were some of the challenges you had mentioned the editing process? What were some of the challenges you faced when writing this book?
So I don't know if this happens for everyone. I know there's at least one other author I talked to, Melody Troll, and she also published with Color Press. She has a similar way of writing to me, and she has things that come to her in her imagination, and then she pieces them together. And that's how I've wrote this book. But the challenges I found were where I got stuck and I didn't know what was going to happen next. Or one particular thing I had that happened was with the Wedding at Cana story. It started out, I thought I was going to write one story on that scenario. But I ended up writing two because I realized that I was actually writing from two different perspectives. So the story kind of split apart. But I didn't know that at the time, and I was getting quite frustrated because the pieces of the story that I was getting in my imagination were not lining up. So that was one challenge. The other challenge was sort of finding the time to write. And I know at one point I got really annoyed frustrated because I did have time to write. This is when I was living in the US and I didn't have a job for a while, but I couldn't write. And I realized later, and I was, by talking to people, I worked out what was happening. And it was because I was in this sort of liminal space where a lot of stuff was happening in my life, but I couldn't actually get words on a page just because of things being unstable in my own life. And I had to go through these shifts and these life changes to actually have the deeper understanding to write about what I needed to write about.
Mm-hmm.
So I found that even though I wasn't physically writing, those times deepened myself, I guess. I became deeper in myself so that I could write the pieces later on because I understood what these people had gone through.
I can definitely identify with that. When we had the COVID shutdown in 2020,
Mm,
that was the first year I didn't write anything. And I had been writing faithfully every year, releasing a book since 2004 or 2008, sorry. And so that was really hard for me. I think what was happening all around us just zapped all of my creativity, and I had nothing.
mm,
I had absolutely no desire to write anything for that whole year. So I completely understand. And then it happened again in 2023 when my father died. I was
Mm,
appointed the trustee of his estate, and I'd never done that before. So not only was I dealing with his death, but then the stress of all of that, and I was supposed to release a book that year, and I had to tell my editor, I'm going to just have to stop writing for several months and just get
mm.
my mind straight. So I completely get what you're saying. Sometimes the words just don't come. But you're a better person for waiting, because after my father died, I was able to write from a deeper place, a deeper
Yes,
understanding.
yes, definitely. That's what I found.
Mm.
And I guess this was a process of me and my becoming closer to Jesus. It was my own personal journey as well. And even though I wanted to complete a book, I guess I'm glad that I let the Spirit guide me in that and did it in God's time. Although that was frustrating because I wanted to be a published author. But,
Yeah.
but now I am, so it all worked out.
Yay.
Um,
Yay. Congratulations. You're right. I mean, I'm like that too. I want what I want when I want it, but sometimes God says, wait. And, but I can just imagine, I mean, here you are studying these women and trying to find your own voice using your imagination and writing about their encounters with Jesus. I can only imagine that that would deepen your love and your faith in him.
Yeah, definitely. I also recommend that if people want to try this sort of imaginative prayer, that they go for it. And, you know, um, it may be completely different, the story that you come up with, but that's okay because I think it's one way that we can communicate with Jesus in a more creative type of way, is this imaginative prayer. Um, and I've definitely found that it's helped me with having a more three-dimensional view and clearer view of who Jesus is in my mind and heart. And I think it could help other people as well.
Yeah, so that brings up my next point. What do you want readers to take away from this book?
So I want them to have a fresh perspective on who Jesus was. I think a lot of things get in the way sometimes of us seeing clearly who Jesus was and what Christianity stands for. And I want a fresh perspective, and I want women to know how much they're loved by Jesus.
Hmm. Well, her story of Jesus released way back in July, sorry, and so it's out in the world right now. So head over to Amazon and get your copy. And so, what's coming next for you?
So I'm still waiting to be led. I feel like there are three main books within me. This is the first one. It's based on Jesus, and as Christians, we believe in the Trinity. I think the next one's based on creation
Hmm.
and is a fantasy book. And I'm exploring ways that fantasy can draw us closer to Christ and heal us as well. There's themes of healing in this book as well, her story of Jesus. So I think it possibly could be a similar format, but I'm not too far into that process of dabbling in that. I'm focusing on marketing this book at the moment and my three kids and my husband, and got a lot going on. So I'm just quietly waiting for the inspiration to come. And whenever I can, I look up bits and pieces about fantasy and the theories behind fantasy and Christianity, Tolkien's and C.S. Lewis's
Mm.
theories and that sort of thing. And then I think I'd write another one that's more based on the Holy Spirit and how the Holy Spirit has worked in my own life and reflections on actual true life for me.
Ooh, that would be powerful. Yes. Well, I'm also a fantasy author. I do write Bible studies as well, and then I wrote a devotional, but I'm mostly a fictional author, and I love fantasy. And I'm right there with you. I've looked at some of the quotes of C.S. Lewis about how fantasy does help us, deal with reality, and that we kind of need that. We want
Mm.
kids to look at the forest in a whole new way and imagine fairies, flying around in there, and that the lightning bugs transform into fairies, things like that. We want them to look deeper into the trees and have that imagination. And for me, of course, it's always about dragons too. But
Mhm.
yeah, I'm right there with you. I think Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and the others really tapped into that. And I know a lot of it was because of their experience in war. And when they came back, it was a coping mechanism for them. So I
Mm.
think it's a great way for people who have experienced trauma or mental health issues. I think reading fantasy can help, writing fantasy can help too. That's
Mm.
probably what drew me to it, growing up with my mom had a lot of mental health issues and escapism was big for me in my household. So it makes sense that I write fantasy. But what do you think about that?
Yes, did you find it healing writing fantasy yourself?
Yes, I do. I really do. I mean, I write some pretty deep topics, in my women's contemporary fiction. I've had them deal with loss, grief, painful divorce, just a lot of heavy, deep topics. And so and I've also done suspense too, where you have a serial killer after a woman, things like that. So when
Oh my
I'm
goodness.
done, yeah. So when I'm done with these books that have, these heavy topics, I immediately go, I'm an artist, and so I go and work on some dragon drawings for a coloring book that I'm putting together, or I start plotting out my next dragon fantasy story. I'm hoping to write another one next year. And it's just a way to cope with all those heavy topics. And so, yeah, it was definitely healing for me, dealing with a lot of family trauma that happened. And so, yeah, I do find that it's healing for me.
That's so good. Yeah, and as I also said, I think I would like to write a novel, and I think maybe on the Samaritan woman's life. So that's another dream I have of my writing career when I have time. We'll see
Yeah,
how it goes,
I don't
time.
know. I don't know how you do it with three little ones. I didn't start writing until my son was pretty close to 10 years old. So I don't know how you do it with three little ones. What is your writing process? Do you wait for them to go to school or to go to sleep?
Well, to be honest, I got pretty good maternity leave. With I wrote a lot of my book actually when my third was born because I had about 12 months off work, and that's what I did when he was sleeping.
Mm.
Um, Uh, and then, yes, I don't know how I'm fitting in much writing at the moment. I just do it, when I have a moment um, to write, maybe when they're watching TV at night or when I'm lying in bed before I fall asleep, I write notes on my phone of things that come to mind. But it's a challenge at the moment to get time to do that,
Oh, I
um, as
bet.
well as um, as well as marketing my book and there was a lot of editing of my book as well. So I found the editing though you don't need as much brain space to do that as you do with actually coming up with the story to begin with. I find I need more space and time and silence. But editing, it's already there on paper for you, so you can do that more. I found that I could do that more so when the kids were doing something else around me. Um, yeah, so it's definitely a challenge, but we'll just see how we go. If God really wants me to write it, then he'll have to provide the time.
That's true, and he will. And that's a good point about the editing process. I hadn't thought of that before. You're right. When we are coming up with our stories and we're writing the dialogue and describing the setting and everything, that does take up a lot of brain power. You're right. A
Mm.
lot of creativity that can drain you. But you're right. When you get the edited book back, you open it up and it's just someone correcting your grammar or your punctuation. And so that's pretty easy. Or they might make suggestions, you should change this, or I don't know about your editor, but my editor's really good at pointing out all of my repeated phrases and words. She'll
Oh yeah,
say this
I
a
do that.
lot. Yeah. And so I just, Google a synonym or look up something in the dictionary, something, and change all those words. But you're right, it doesn't take nearly as much brain space as coming up with a brand new story, and characters. Oh my goodness, yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of details that go into that first part of the process.
Did your editor tell you, to make some significant changes?
Well, I did have wonderful feedback and it was done in such a nice way, but I think I got about 20 pages of recommendations when I first got my manuscript back. But it was all very constructive and written in such a nice way. So I really appreciated it. It was very gently delivered by Madison from Yellow Press. So she did a really good job. But I got it back and I was like, oh my goodness, I have so much work to do.
It is quite the process. You're right. It can be quite a shock that first time. My first editor, he was old school. And so he had me print out my manuscript and hand it to him, and he would go through it with a red pen, the old fashioned way from like the
Oh, wow.
1970s. I know. And I could barely even read his handwriting. So we would meet in a cafe and then he would go over it with me. And Katie, he was brutal. I mean, I would leave those meetings in tears and just cry all the way home.
Oh, no.
But like your editor, his suggestions really did make the book a lot better.
Mm.
And one time he told me you need to cut like all these pages, they make no sense, blah blah blah. So I ended up cutting like 50,000 words from that second book I wrote. But as painful as it was, and as humiliating as it was, they both books ended up being so much better because of his input. I think by book three, I remember he gave me my manuscript back and he wrote, "Wow, your writing has improved tremendously." And I was like, "Oh, coming from him, that was praise indeed." And I noticed there were fewer red marks throughout the whole manuscript too. So that was really wonderful. So yeah, listeners out there who want to be writers, the editing process is so important. Please don't hop skip over that step. It is so important to your writing as much as it stings to get that manuscript back, or like Katie said, 20 pages of suggestions. It hurts, but hopefully, like your editor, Katie, they explain it in a constructive way with kindness, knowing that this is your project that you've been working on for so long, and they just don't rip it to shreds.
Yeah, it's hard. It's humbling, but it's good to be humbled because if you're writing for God, it's got to be God that writes it, not yourself. So you're going to let go of that ego.
Oh, good point. You're right. If it's a story he gave you, you have to be willing to let it go and let him. Oh, that's a good point. I love that.
But also, I think you have to hold true. If you really think that something should be in the story and the editor's telling you no, um, I think you can do that too and
Oh,
keep it
yeah,
there. Yeah.
absolutely. In my third book, in my Dragon Forest trilogy, I had an ending where my main character was doing something and saying something, and my editor said, "No, no, no, he would never say that. That's crazy. You shouldn't put that in there." And I said, "Are you kidding me?" I said I've known this character for like 10 years now. I've been writing him.
Mm.
He's a 13-year-old boy. I know exactly what he would do and what he would say. So I'm leaving it exactly the way it is. And people have read the book and told me, yeah, it's fine. It's great. So, but you're right. Sometimes you just have to fight and say, no, that I'm keeping this. I feel strongly about it. I appreciate what you say, but I'm keeping it this way. And yeah, you just have to put your foot down sometimes.
Yeah, it's all a lot of discernment that goes into that. Um, yeah, so I learned a lot during that process about that sort of thing, about what edits to go with, what to stick, what I wanted to keep, and letting God be the true author. Um,
Mm. Yeah, and you're right. You just have to set your ego aside.
Definitely.
Well, Katie, this has been wonderful getting to know you and your writing journey and your book, Her Story of Jesus. And remember, listeners, it is out there in the world right now. Can they visit your website to learn more about you, or your Substack page? Or
Yeah, my Substack page is where I'm most active. So I'm Katie Sampias on Substack. I'm hopefully pretty easy to find, but possibly, Ruth, you can put my Substack in the show notes, so people can find me more easily. And all the links to where you can get my book are there. But yes, I'm on Amazon.com in all the different countries, and Barnes and Noble as well. And also, you can buy my book directly from Color Press.
fantastic. Well, thank you. Thank you. I know you're busy, and so I appreciate you taking time to chat with me today. Thank you, Katie.
Oh, thanks for having me, Ruth. It's been a pleasure.
was so interesting listening to Katie Sampias talk about her book, Her Story of Jesus, available on Amazon right now. And be sure to head over to her Substack, Katie Sampias, to learn more about her, to read some of the posts that she has on there and all of her links to her book. And I hope that you've been encouraged by Katie's story about how she really sought God's guidance and prayer, and she was patient, waiting on Him to lead her. And that is something that I need to work on, that's for sure. And so I'm going to start praying more about my next story and what God wants me to do on my writing journey. But most of all, I hope that you have been encouraged to keep writing on your writing journey. She's a mom of 3 kids, and yet she makes time for her writing. And so I hope that you do too. Always going forward on your writing journey. And until next time, thanks for listening. God bless.